evening, afternoon, morning, wherever it is where you are. I was just reading through the YouTube comments of the last video, programming for athletes, and getting. I was gonna do a bit where I read out the YouTube comment while you're watching the YouTube, and hopefully it was you who was, and then it'd be anyway. I thought it'd be good to do that because if you're watching it, you feel special, but. I've decided against that. So let's go into today. So this video is called Understanding the Basics of Training. Now, this is a big topic and probably a little controversial just depending on what you do for training. So let's say that we're talking about strength training in general, the basics of strength training. The way this conversation was stimulated, just to give you some background about how I came about this video and why to do it. So I trained this morning with a good friend of mine, Big Lock. So he's called that because obviously he's big. So him and I were training this morning, and one of the things that happens regularly with this guy is that people are constantly hounding him about how he trains because of the way he looks. Flip that on its head, training is specific to what the goal is. So for him, currently, his physique is a result of the way he's training. Just pause there. Okay, so however you want to look, you can look as long as you're willing to give up everything else to do that thing. Okay, so when you see somebody who looks amazing with a six-pack and really nice shoulders and symmetrical back and good legs, that is what they train to do. We're good? Sweet? Just because somebody trains every single day doesn't mean they're going to have a six-pack, because that might not be what they're training for. Okay, so the basics. The basics is choose the goal first and sacrifice everything else for that goal if that goal is super important. Okay, so if you want to go to the Olympics for the bobsled team, you don't need to walk around with a six-pack. You need to do the things that you need to do as an athlete to make it to the Olympics for that sport. If you're an NRL player, having a six-pack doesn't mean you score more tries. So it's very integral that you understand when you're picking your training that those things need to line up with the end goal. That's the basics. And that's very, very important to understand before we talk about whether you should squat, whether you should throw, whether you should move side to side or move straight back and forward. That's probably the most important piece. And the reason it's the most important piece is because if that thing's not solidified, if you don't know exactly what you're doing, it's very easy to get swayed in different direction. I'll give you an example. I want to get big and strong. Okay, cool. You need to squat, you need to press, and you need to deadlift, and you need to eat lots of food. Okay, cool. I start doing that for 4 weeks. I put on a little bit of body fat, my numbers aren't phenomenal, and I see some guy with abs walking down the beach, and I change my opinion and go, I want to do that. I do that for then 3 weeks. I do a bodybuilding program with a bro split, chest and buys on fucking Friday, and then legs and tries on Saturday. And I do that for 3 weeks. And then I see Big Lockie deadlifting 250 and I want to deadlift 250. I want to deadlift 250 tomorrow. So I jump on a powerlifting program and I do a 3-day split with 6-minute rest in between. That is probably why we get good results and most people don't, is because you can stick to something that's goal orientated, because that goal is very, very important to you. If the goal isn't very important, then the training's not very important. If the training's not very important, you're going to be motivated to turn up and do that training every day. Okay, so you've got to commit to that's how you want to be and do the training for that for a long time, for 12 years, if that's the case. Okay, so that's the basics of how to pick what you want to do. And it doesn't have to be physique orientated. It can be athletic, obviously like his Olympic dream has nothing to do with how he looks. All I'm trying to do here is really give you a simple way to assess how to train by what you want at the end of training. Now, the fundamental movements of strength training. So, there's 4. Okay, you have the hip hinge, you have the squat, you have the pull, and you have the push. This is training 101. So hip hinge means hip backwards. Squat means hip down. Press means away from the body. Pull means towards the body. Now, of course, there's other things. Okay, there's midline, there's rotation, but they're the basics, the 4 basics of understanding how to move. Okay, so now you've got those 4 fundamental movements. Okay, the other thing that we don't talk about enough of is range of motion in those movements, especially for health and longevity, which is why 90% of people train, is for health and longevity. Health and longevity is range of motion. Okay, so the longer, healthier, more athletic the muscle, the better it's going to be for you in the long run. Okay, the better the ligament and tendon health is going to be, the more, hopefully, over time, the more weight you'll be able to move because you're recruiting more muscle fibers, the more bracing that you'll need because you're taking yourself through more load. So the thing that's probably underrated is range of movement through those 4 fundamentals. Okay, so that's the basics of those 4 movements. You need to increase the range of motion, okay, to a safe, healthy range of motion, and then increase intensity by adding load. Once you've done that, then you can add variations to those movements to stimulate new growth and stimulate new results. What are you going to have to do to balance that energy output? If I'm starting to increase load, I'm starting to use more muscle fibers, I'm starting to get bigger degradation of muscle fibers, I need to eat more food. Okay, so as I increase the intensity, I increase the caloric intake. If I want to put on muscle mass, I have to eat a caloric surplus. If I want to lose muscle mass, okay, I need to eat a calorie deficit, or with smart nutrition. Don't just listen to me and dump your calories down or add 1,000 calories. Be smart, seek out the right people for you, do what works for you, get some blood tests done. But that's the basics. Okay, so once you've got those basics down, you can then add variance, you can add intensity, you can add load, you can add stimulus, you can add fit. But the funniest piece to the puzzle is that when you come back to it and you were to ask a guy like Big Lock what he's doing right now, it's going to be, I squat and do all my pressing on a Monday, I pull and do all my deadlifting on a Tuesday, I press and pull on a say a Friday, and then I have a couple of days off and I do it again. So the irony of slowly developing those things is as you do that, you're obviously going to come back to those basics and want to build those bases even bigger so that you can add more variation and more load over time. So do actually come back to those basics and value what they do for you, and probably see them a little bit more positively saw them when you first started, like, if I learn to squat, then I can move forward. So yeah, there's a bit of irony in it, but it's key to understand how to move forward, and you can't move forward without first coming back and looking at those things. So I hope that helps. Any questions, drop them below, and yeah, enjoy.